Kyiv's defense ministry claims that more than 5,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the first 4 days of fighting in Ukraine. However, Russia's defense ministry said it has established total air superiority over Ukraine on the 5th day. Russia's defense ministry has appealed to Ukrainian civilians to leave the capital Kyiv as Moscow presses ahead with its offensive. The Ukrainian military says Russian troops have slowed down their assault. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO member states are stepping up their support for Ukraine by providing Kyiv with air defense missiles and anti-tank weapons.
Уже штук 20 пролетіло.
The 49th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council commenced in Geneva today. A vote was taken at the session today to determine if an urgent debate should be held to discuss about the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Following the vote, a decision was made to hold the urgent debate and to include that in the agenda because 29 votes were cast in favor of the debate while 5 were against and 13 countries including India and Pakistan abstained from voting.
Russia, a member of this council, perpetrated an unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine. It was an attack not only on Ukraine, it was an attack on every UN member state. Russian forces attempt to sow panic among the population by specifically targeting kindergartens and orphanages, hospitals and mobile medical aid brigades, thus committing acts that may amount to war crimes. Russian aggression is accompanied by a massive flow of disinformation that aims to distort the truth and mislead the international community. It is a duty of the UN Human Rights Council to demonstrate its credibility and relevance and to take appropriate action.
For 8 years, Kiev has continued to bomb its own citizens. A legitimate question to ask where you were, Western colleagues, for all these years. Why have you not raised your voices in Human Rights Council whilst the peaceful population in the Donbass were dying? Instead of bringing the Ukrainian authorities to reason and forcing them finally to establish a direct dialogue with their residents in the southeast part of the country, the collective West only fanned the fire of the internal Ukrainian conflict, encouraging nationalist sentiment and pumping the Kiev regime full of weapons. In these conditions, the decision to conduct a special operation to stop the tragedy in Ukraine was taken. We had no other choice.
Michelle Bachelet said most of the deaths were a result of the use of explosive weapons with a wide impact area including shelling from heavy artillery and multi-launch rocket systems and airstrikes.
The military attack on Ukraine is putting at risk countless lives. Between Thursday morning and last night, our office has recorded 406 civilian casualties, including 102 killed, including 7 children, and 304 injured. Most of these civilians were killed by explosive weapons with a wide impact area, including shelling from heavy artillery and multi-launch rocket systems and airstrikes. The real figures are, I fear, considerably higher. Meanwhile, millions of civilians, including vulnerable and older people, are forced to huddle in different forms of bomb shelters, such as underground stations to escape explosions. UNHCR reported that 422,000 people have fled the country and many more are internally displaced. My thoughts go out to them and to all those across the world who suffer.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the EU to grant immediate membership to Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Vatican's top diplomat said the Vatican is ready to facilitate dialogue between Russia and Ukraine to end the war. A former US ambassador to NATO said Putin's decision to put Russia's nuclear forces on high alert is a warning to the West not to get involved. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his defense chiefs to put the country's nuclear deterrence forces on high alert and accused the West of taking unfriendly steps against his country. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin has called for all sides to remain calm and avoid further escalation after Russian President Vladimir Putin put his country's nuclear deterrent on high alert.
With the rising tensions between Ukraine and Russia, the economic situation in Russia is also in a turmoil. Now, the Russian currency ruble has plummeted by 30%. And the investor confidence in Russia is also declining. What measures have the Central Bank of Russia has taken in this regard?
Russia's central bank has more than doubled interest rates to 20%.
Добрый день.
As it regards the banking sector liquidity, the Bank of Russia is continuously providing cash and non-cash rubles to banks. Due to the high demand for cash, the banking sector is now experiencing a structural liquidity deficit. Banks have sufficient collateral to increase the amount of liquidity raised from the Bank of Russia. The government has announced the decision obliging enterprises to sell 80% of their export revenues. We have allowed banks not to revaluate their investment in securities as well as foreign currency assets and liabilities for calculating capital adequacy ratios. This will help banks gradually adjust to the new environment. We will not enforce the banks sanctioned by foreign states to comply with open currency position limits. It is critical to support not only banks but also their clients. As a result of the imposed sanctions, households and companies are also experiencing a deterioration of their financial position. In this regard, we recommend that banks should meet the needs of their clients, approving loan restructuring without imposing any penalties and fines on such loans. If a borrower is facing hardships with a loan at a floating rate and the bank is ready to restructure such a loan, we are also prepared to grant regulatory easing for provisions. All banks are fulfilling and will continue to fulfill all obligations to their clients. We have granted regulatory easing to insurers and professional securities for market participants. We have been developing the domestic financial infrastructure. It will continue to operate smoothly. Namely, we have the financial messaging system that can replace SWIFT inside Russia and allows the connection of foreign participants.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in a major shift for Germany's defense policy, has committed $113 million in military spending, as he promised a revamp of the country's armed forces following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Oil prices jumped today as Western allies imposed more sanctions on Russia and blocked some Russian banks from a global payment system, which could cause severe disruptions to its oil exports.
Over 422,000 people have left Ukraine and many more have been displaced. While a certain number of Ukrainians are leaving the country, another set has taken this matter into their hands. In order to help their leaders in fighting against Russia, they have now come up with their own ways of fighting for their country.
Many Ukrainian civilians have organized themselves to defend their neighborhoods against Russian forces. Newsfirst received footage of teachers, professionals, and other ordinary citizens in Ukraine working to prepare Molotov cocktails and other weapons.